The dust from the funeral procession lingered in the air as Elena Hayes stood alone by her husband's grave. Her black dress clung to her skin, stained by the desert's relentless red dirt. The weight of it all, of the loss, the grief, was suffocating. 3 months had passed since Thomas's death, yet it felt as fresh as the day Sheriff Dalton had knocked on her door with the news. Shot down in a dispute over water rights that should never have turned violent. A bullet meant for someone else ended his life. Elena's heart ached, a constant throb that wouldn't fade. She was 22, already a widow, and with Thomas's death, her dreams had been buried alongside him in the hard Arizona ground. The land they had bought, the cattle they had hoped to raise, the house they planned to build, gone. Her fingers trembled as they traced the letters on the weathered headstone, the final marker of a future she would never see. The townsfolk had paid their respects, their words of sympathy long since worn out. It was as if the world had moved on, leaving her behind. There were whispers, some gentle, some less kind, urging her to pack up and leave, to go back east where her sister lived, to start fresh, away from the heartbreak, away from the desolation. But Elena couldn't. This land was her and Thomas's dream. The thought of leaving it behind, of abandoning everything they had worked for, felt like betrayal. She couldn't let go. Not yet. Not while there was still a breath of life in her that wanted to fight for it. A shadow fell across the grave, blocking out the sun for a brief moment. Elena turned slowly, her gaze meeting a man who stood just beyond the cemetery fence. His wide-brimmed hat shielded his face, but she could see the weathered lines of his face beneath the brim, and the hard, calloused hands that gripped his hat with a quiet intensity. He stood still, his gaze steady, as though he had known exactly where to find her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and calm, like the desert wind that swept through the valley. "I apologize for intruding on your grief." Quote. She felt a jolt of surprise. Her grief had been so personal, so isolated, she hadn't realized someone was near. "I'm Xavier Hallbrook," he continued, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "I knew your husband, Thomas." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She blinked hard, as though the name might be a mistake. "You knew him?" she asked, her voice soft with disbelief. "Aye." Xavier nodded slowly, turning his hat in his hands, his movements deliberate. "We rode together for a time, moved cattle from Texas to California. He was a good man, one of the best I ever worked with." Elena's heart ached with an emotion she couldn't name. She hadn't known much about Thomas's past before they met. Only the man who had come into her life with big dreams and an even bigger heart. She remembered how he'd spoken of the men he had met along his trail drives, of the friends he'd made. Thomas had spoken of Xavier before, but in passing, with fondness. "He saved my life once," Xavier continued, his voice quieter now. "Pulled me from the Pecos River when my horse went under. Thomas had a way of seeing the right path when I couldn't." Elena didn't know how to respond. She had cried so many tears in the last 3 months that she had believed she was drained of them. But now, hearing Xavier's quiet reverence for Thomas, the dam of grief threatened to break once more. "I didn't know he had friends like you," she said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. Xavier didn't speak for a moment, his eyes casting down to the grave. The silence between them was thick, full of memories of what was lost. Finally, he spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of an unspoken understanding. "I only just heard about what happened," Xavier said, his tone heavy with regret. "If I had known, I would have come sooner. I'm sorry for your loss." Elena didn't know what to say to that. "We had plans," she said, her voice faltering. "Thomas and I, we bought land 10 miles west of here, near the creek. We were going to build something, raise cattle, breed horses." Xavier's gaze softened as he took a step closer. "It's a good place, good land," he said, his eyes scanning the dry hills beyond the cemetery. "It's worth fighting for." Elena felt a rush of emotion, hope, anger, fear, coursing through her all at once. She turned her gaze back to Thomas's grave, the finality of it all, sinking deep into her bones. "I don't know if I can fight anymore," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The bank's threatening to foreclose. I can't do it alone. Thomas is gone, and I'm left here with nothing but a dream that's slipping through my fingers." Xavier stood quietly for a moment, his gaze unwavering. Then he spoke again, his voice as steady as the ground beneath their feet. "I can help," he said simply. "I've saved some money from my time working in Colorado. I know ranching. If you'll have me, I can help you save this place. We can make it work." Elena stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. She couldn't tell if it was genuine kindness, a debt to Thomas, or a mix of both. She didn't know what to make of it. "You don't owe me anything," she said, shaking her head. "You don't even know me." Quote, "I don't need to," Xavier said, his voice low but firm. "I knew Thomas. I owe him more than I can ever repay, but if I can help save what he started, I'll do it. No questions asked." Elena felt a sharp pang in her chest, a mixture of hope and suspicion. Could she really trust him? Could she let someone else into this painful world she'd built for herself? But then Xavier's eyes softened, and there was something in his gaze, something unwavering, that calmed her turbulent thoughts. "I'm not here to replace him," he continued, his words steady, "but I will honor his memory by making sure his dream doesn't die with him." Elena looked at him for a long time, the quiet weight of his promise hanging in the air between them. Something in her shifted, just a little, a crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. "Maybe," she said softly, "maybe you could help." Xavier gave a slight nod, his gaze never leaving hers. "We'll take it one step at a time." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. It wasn't an easy choice, but maybe, just maybe, this man, this stranger who had known her husband, could help her find a way forward. And if she was lucky, he might even help her find something more. The next morning, Elena found herself standing in front of the old barn, her hands resting on her hips as she stared out over the ranch. The land looked unchanged, the dry grass and scrub brush stretching for miles in every direction. The creek, a thin trickle of water, wound its way through the middle of the property, as it had for years. It was beautiful in its own way, but it felt too quiet now, too empty. The house sat in the distance, small and faded in the morning light, a reflection of the emptiness she felt inside. Xavier had arrived just after sunrise, his dark horse steady under him as he rode up the trail. She could see him now, moving around the property with a calm assurance that made something inside her stir. He was quick to work, already hauling tools from his pack to start on the most pressing repairs. The broken fences, the cabin's sagging roof, the corral that hadn't seen a strong hand in months. Elena hadn't realized how much work had been left undone until she saw it through his eyes. The ranch was crumbling beneath her, a dream that had once seemed so vibrant, now barely clinging to life. She'd tried her best to keep it going, but there was only so much one person could do. And Thomas, her Thomas, hadn't left her with the resources to keep the land alive on her own. She hadn't been able to face the reality until now. Until Xavier. He moved with purpose, like he was at home here, like he belonged. It was in the way he handled the tools, the way he took in the land and seemed to understand its needs with just a glance. There was no hesitation in his movements, no uncertainty. He was here to stay, even if she didn't know if she was ready to let him. Elena's chest tightened, and she pulled her hat lower over her eyes, trying to block out the feelings that were threatening to rise to the surface. She was still angry. Angry at the world, at herself, at the way everything had fallen apart so quickly. But she couldn't afford to stay angry. Not anymore. "Morning," Xavier's voice called out as he approached, carrying a small crate of nails and a hammer. He wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes studying her with that steady gaze that never wavered. "Morning," she said, her voice steady, though there was a lingering hesitation in her tone. "I've got the roof patched up," he said, glancing back toward the cabin. "It'll hold for now, but we'll need to replace the shingles before the rain hits." Elena nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. "Thank you," she said, her words quieter than she meant them to be. There was a strange tenderness in her voice, a recognition that he had come here to help, and she had no idea what that would mean for her. Xavier set down the crate and stepped closer. "Don't mention it. I said I'd help, didn't I?" "You did," Elena said, her eyes drifting toward the distant mountains. "But I didn't expect." She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. She hadn't expected any of this. His offer to help, his steady presence, his promise to honor Thomas's memory while building something new. Xavier's gaze softened, but he didn't press her. Instead, he looked around at the property, taking in the land, the cabin, the barn. "You've got good land here," he said thoughtfully. "With the right care, you could build it up again, not all at once, but little by little." "I know," Elena replied, her voice heavy, "but I can't do it alone. I've tried." "I'm not asking you to," Xavier said gently. "We'll do it together." Elena felt something catch in her throat. The weight of his words, so simple yet so full of meaning, made her want to break down. She'd spent so many months alone, fighting through the grief, struggling to keep things together, and now, here was this man, offering his help, his time, his energy. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Elena swallowed hard, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "I didn't ask for your help," she said, her voice tight. "I didn't expect you to. I don't even know what you want from me." Xavier's expression didn't change. "I told you, I'm here to honor Thomas and help you make this ranch what it was meant to be. That's all I want." "I don't know how to let you in," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't know how to let anyone in, not after." Her voice faltered, and Xavier took a step closer, his presence grounding her. "You don't have to let me in all at once," Xavier said quietly. "We can take it slow. I'm not here to rush you, Elena. I'm just here to help." She felt a wave of emotion she hadn't expected. Her chest tightened, her breath catching as she forced herself to swallow back the tears. "I don't even know if I can do this anymore," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can keep fighting for this land, for this dream, for him." The silence between them stretched, but Xavier didn't move, didn't offer platitudes or easy comfort. He simply stood with her, letting her words hang in the air. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again. "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly. "And you don't have to do it for him. You can do it for you, for what you still believe in." Elena turned toward him, her eyes brimming with a mixture of exhaustion and uncertainty. But there was something in his gaze, something unyielding, steady, that made her wonder if, maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had thought. "You're offering more than I can take right now," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I'll try. Xavier gave her a small, understanding nod. "That's all I'm asking for." As they stood together, the land stretched out before them, rough and unforgiving, yet full of possibility. Elena didn't know what the future held, or what this partnership would truly mean. But for the first time in months, a small spark of hope flickered in her chest. Maybe it was possible to build something again, even from the broken pieces of the past. The days that followed were a blur of hard work and quiet moments. Elena had always known the ranch needed attention, but seeing it through Xavier's eyes made everything clearer. Everything that had once seemed like a distant dream now felt within reach, but the weight of it still pressed heavily on her chest. There was so much to do, so little time, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. But every morning as the sun rose over the horizon, Xavier was there. His quiet strength, his steady hand, and his unfailing patience were like a balm to her raw soul. They worked side by side. He repaired the fences, replaced the shingles on the cabin, and cleared out the corral, while Ina tended to the horses, fed the cattle, and scrubbed the cabin's interior. It was grueling work, but there was something almost comforting in the routine of it. Xavier didn't push her. He didn't force her to talk, didn't ask questions about her past or what she had lost. He simply worked beside her, and with every task completed, she felt a small weight lifting from her shoulders. One afternoon, as they were walking back from the barn after another long day, Elena glanced over at Xavier. His shirt was damp with sweat, his face dusted with the telltale marks of a day spent in the sun. But his eyes, they were steady, calm, And for reasons Elena couldn't explain, they had become a source of quiet comfort for her. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than she intended, "for all your help. For everything." Xavier met her gaze, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a kindness, a warmth, that made her heart skip. "Like I said," he replied, his voice low, "I'm not here for thanks. I'm here to help. I told Thomas I'd do this. Honor his memory." Elena felt a pang of grief at the mention of Thomas's name. It was still hard to hear, still hard to think about him without feeling that familiar ache deep in her chest. She didn't know what to say, so instead, she simply nodded. The silence between them was comfortable, unspoken understanding hanging in the air. "I didn't think I could trust anyone again," she said after a long pause. "Not after everything. I thought I was alone in all of this. But you've made it easier." Xavier's gaze softened, his voice quiet. "You don't have to trust me all at once, Elena. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." She felt a lump form in her throat, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She had no idea why Xavier's words affected her so deeply. Maybe it was the sincerity in his voice, or maybe it was the fact that, for the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't carrying the weight of the world on her own. "Maybe," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "maybe I'm starting to believe that." As the weeks passed, the ranch began to show signs of life again. The fences were mended, the barn repaired, and the animals seemed healthier. The weight of the impending foreclosure lifted, though the threat of it still loomed in the back of her mind. But what surprised Elena most was the way she found herself growing used to Xavier's presence. He wasn't just the man who helped her fix fences or repair the barn. He was becoming something more, someone she could rely on, someone who made the long, lonely hours of the day bearable. There was something steady about him. He worked hard, never complained, and always listened when she needed to talk, even when she didn't quite know how to express what she was feeling. But he never pushed her. Not once did he try to replace Thomas, and for that, Elena was grateful. One evening, after they had finished another day of work, Elena sat on the porch of the cabin, looking out at the setting sun. The sky was streaked with hues of orange and pink, and the desert around her seemed to glow in the fading light. Xavier sat next to her, silent but present, a companion in the quiet moments. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, her voice soft, almost to herself. "I never thought I'd be able to stay, but something about this place, it calls to me. It always has." Xavier nodded, his gaze on the horizon. "It's a good land, strong. It just needs someone who believes in it, someone who's willing to fight for it." Elena turned toward him, surprised by the depth of his words. "You really think so?" "I do," he said, his voice steady. "It may be hard, it may take time, but it can be done. You've already started. I'm just here to help you finish it." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Xavier wasn't just here because of some debt he owed to Thomas. He was here because he believed in her, in this place, in the dream she and Thomas had started. He wasn't asking for anything in return. He wasn't asking for her heart, for her love. He was simply asking for the chance to help. And that realization, that simple, honest kindness, brought tears to her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by the sudden rush of emotion. Xavier glanced at her, his expression softening when he saw her struggle. Without a word, he reached over and gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. It wasn't pity. It wasn't an attempt to comfort her with words. It was just support, solid, unyielding support. "You're doing well, Elena," he said quietly. "You're stronger than you know." Her heart swelled at his words. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. Maybe it wasn't about being strong all the time. Maybe it was okay to rely on someone else, to trust them, even if it was just a little. Maybe she didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. "I'm trying," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm really trying." Xavier gave her a smile, his eyes warm. "I know, and that's enough." They sat there together as the sun dipped lower, the land bathed in golden light, and the sounds of the ranch settled into the evening. For the first time in a long while, Elena felt like she wasn't alone, not just because of Xavier's physical presence, but because of the unspoken understanding that passed between them. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The days grew longer, the heat of summer settling over the Arizona desert like a heavy cloak. Yet, as the sun beat down on the land, the pace of life at the ranch picked up. There was work to be done, always work, and the morning started early, long before the sun reached its peak. Elena had grown accustomed to the rhythm of each day, the sound of the animals stirring in the early light, the smell of the barn, the creak of the fences as they were repaired, the steady thrum of hard labor. And with each passing day, she found herself growing more comfortable with Xavier's presence, more confident in the choices they had made together. But even so, there were still moments when doubt crept into her mind, when the weight of grief and memory threatened to crush her again. One evening, after they'd finished a long day of working on the fences, Elena found herself standing at the edge of the property, gazing toward the distant hills. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the fading light casting long shadows over the land. The soft breeze stirred the dry grasses, carrying with it the scent of dust and earth. Xavier had been quiet that day, his focus on the work, but Elena could sense something different in the air. It was in the way he moved, the way he carried himself, a certain tension she couldn't place. "Xavier?" she called, her voice carrying across the open space. He turned to her, his expression unreadable, and for a moment they simply stood there in the silence, the land stretching between them. "Elena," he said, his voice low and steady, "can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat. His tone was different, softer, but there was something deeper in his voice, something unspoken. "Of course," she replied, stepping toward him. They walked together for a moment, the sound of their boots crunching on the dry earth, the only noise in the still evening air. Xavier didn't say anything at first, but Elena could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. Finally, he stopped, turning to face her. His eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were focused, but there was something vulnerable in them that she hadn't seen before. "Elena, I know we're in the middle of all this work," he began, his voice quiet. "And I know it's not easy for you. But I've been thinking about something. About us." Elena's heart tightened in her chest. His words were so simple, yet they carried so much weight. She swallowed, trying to steady her breath. "What about us?" Xavier took a deep breath, his jaw tightening slightly. "I'm not here to complicate things for you. I'm not asking for something that you're not ready for. But I need you to understand something. I care about you. I've come to care about you in a way that's deeper than just helping out with the ranch. I'm not here just to honor Thomas's memory. I'm here because I believe in you. I believe in this place, in what we're doing together." Elena felt a rush of emotion at his words, a mixture of relief, fear, and something else. Something that made her chest tighten in a way she didn't know how to explain. She turned her gaze toward the land, trying to collect her thoughts, but the truth of his words echoed through her like a bell. "I care about you too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Xavier reached out then, his hand brushing lightly against her arm. His touch was gentle but firm, and the warmth of it sent a shiver down her spine. "I know you're still grieving. I know you're still carrying Thomas with you," Xavier said, his voice low, "and I'm not asking you to forget him, to replace him. I would never ask that of you. But what I am asking is this. Can we find a way to build something here together? Can we find a way to honor both the past and the future?" Elena closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy blanket. The idea of moving forward, of embracing a future that didn't just live in the shadow of Thomas, terrified her. How could she? How could she move on when the love she had shared with Thomas was so raw, so alive within her? But Xavier's presence was undeniable. It was steady, grounded, and full of quiet strength. It was a stark contrast to the emptiness she had felt since Thomas died. And yet, every time she thought she might open up to it, the fear gripped her again, the fear of letting go, of losing something precious. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can let go of what I had with Thomas. It's not just about the ranch, Xavier. It's about the person I was before, the person I thought I could be with him." Xavier nodded, his eyes understanding. I'm not asking you to forget him, Elena. I'm asking you to allow yourself the possibility of something new, something that doesn't erase the past, but doesn't let it define you either. Elena felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly as though embarrassed by the vulnerability. But Xavier didn't look away. He didn't look uncomfortable. He simply stood there, waiting, as though giving her the space she needed. "I don't want to betray him," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I loved him. I still love him." Xavier took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm once more. "You're not betraying him," he said, his voice steady and warm. "You're choosing to live. And you're honoring his memory by doing so, by building what he wanted with someone who cares about you and who believes in this place as much as you do." Elena stood there for a long moment, the weight of his words settling deep inside her. Could she really do this? Could she truly allow herself to move forward? To build something with Xavier without forgetting Thomas? The land around them stretched out, quiet and waiting, and for the first time in months, Elena felt a flicker of something more than just sorrow. She felt the possibility of hope. She turned to Xavier, meeting his eyes. "Maybe I can," she said, her voice steady. "Maybe I can. But it's going to take time. And it's not going to be easy." Xavier smiled, a small, understanding smile. "I'm not asking for easy, Elena. I'm asking for patience. From both of us." They stood there together, the silence between them now full of understanding. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the land, and in that moment, Elena realized that perhaps the future wasn't so far out of reach after all. It was there, waiting for her, waiting for them to build it together. The days turned into weeks, and the harsh Arizona sun began to soften under the early hints of autumn. The land was slowly starting to come back to life. The cattle were growing stronger, the horses were responding well to Elena's gentle hand, and the fences, though still in need of repair, were holding. Elena found herself waking each morning with a new sense of purpose, something she hadn't felt in months. The ranch was still a long way from being saved, but it wasn't dying anymore. It was living, and that was enough. Xavier remained a quiet presence at her side, steady and unwavering, working from dawn until dusk without complaint, always with an eye on the big picture. They had begun to talk more, not just about the ranch, but about life, about the things that shaped them. Xavier spoke of his childhood in Texas, the losses he had endured, and the freedom he had found in the open land. Elena shared bits of her life in St. Louis, her dreams before Thomas, the loneliness she had felt even in a crowded city. They had come to understand each other in a way that was quiet but profound. One evening, as they sat together on the porch after a long day, Elena watched Xavier closely. He had been quieter than usual, his brow furrowed as he stared out toward the horizon. She could see the weight of something on his mind. And it wasn't just the ranch. "Something's bothering you," she said softly, breaking the silence. Xavier turned to her, his expression unreadable at first, but then a small, rueful smile crossed his face. "I suppose I'm just thinking about all of this. What we've built, what we're still working toward." "You mean the ranch?" Elena asked, her tone light but curious. "Partly," Xavier replied, shifting slightly in his seat. "But I've been thinking more about you, about what comes next, for you. I don't want to be the one holding you back." Elena frowned, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean, holding me back?" Xavier hesitated for a moment, then spoke with quiet sincerity. "You're still grieving, Elena. I see it in the way you sometimes look at the land, the way you talk about Thomas. I know you've started to move forward. Really, I do. But I don't want you to feel like you're doing it for me, or because you feel some obligation. You need to find your own way, your own future." Elena's chest tightened at his words. She had been so focused on the ranch, so caught up in the work of survival, that she hadn't stopped to think about what came next for her personally. What did she want? Was she moving forward out of necessity, or because she was beginning to open herself to new possibilities? "You've helped me more than I can say, Xavier," she said after a long pause. "I never expected to find someone who cared about this place as much as I did. And I never expected you. You've done more for me than I could ever repay." Xavier's eyes softened, but there was something in his gaze, something hesitant, that made Elena pause. "I'm not asking for anything in return," he said quietly. "But I don't want you to lose yourself in all this. You deserve more than just surviving. You deserve to live. To find what you want for yourself." His words struck her deeply. How many times had she put the ranch, Thomas, and everything else before her own needs? How many times had she buried her own desires beneath the weight of grief and responsibility? "I'm not sure I know what I want anymore," she admitted, her voice thick. "I've been living for so long in the shadow of loss that I don't know what it feels like to live for me." "You will," Xavier said, his voice warm, reassuring. "You'll find it, in time." Elena looked out at the land, the sprawling hills bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. She had spent so many months just trying to keep things from falling apart, trying to keep the memory of Thomas alive, trying to honor the life they had started. But maybe Xavier was right. Maybe it was time to think about what came next, about what she wanted, and not just what she had lost. "I think I'm starting to see that," she said softly, her heart still heavy, but lighter than it had been in months. Xavier gave a small, knowing smile, and the moment felt like a turning point, one they had both been waiting for, though neither had known it until now. "Do you think," Elena began, hesitating, "do you think we can really do this? Build this ranch into something more than just a place of survival? Can it really be a home again?" Quote. Xavier's smile grew, and he stood up, offering her a hand. "I think we can, but it's going to take both of us." She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet, and they stood together in the growing twilight, the weight of the world between them still heavy but somehow lessened. The ranch was still far from where it needed to be, and the work was endless. But there was something different now. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building something that mattered, together. As they walked back toward the cabin, side by side, Elena felt a quiet sense of peace settle in her chest. There was still grief there, still loss, but there was also hope, and the possibility of something new. The next morning they rode out together, the sun barely rising over the horizon. The ranch was waiting for them, as it always had been. But now, as Elena looked over the land, she didn't just see the weight of the past. She saw the future, a future she could face with someone who understood her, who believed in her. And for the first time in a long while, Elena felt like she wasn't just living in the shadow of grief anymore. She was living. The following weeks passed with a renewed energy, as if the land itself was waking up, responding to the quiet determination that now pulsed through the ranch. Elena and Xavier worked side by side, each task a small victory: a mended fence, a barn restored, the creek running steady again after a much-needed repair. Every day brought them closer to something resembling the dream Thomas had shared with her, and every day Elena felt a little more like herself again. But even as the ranch slowly came back to life, there was still that subtle ache in her chest. The grief for Thomas never truly left, not completely. It hovered in the background, a quiet companion that would never fully fade. Yet, as she worked beside Xavier, as they shared meals and talked through the long nights, Elena began to realize something she hadn't been ready to see before. She was learning to love again, not as a replacement for Thomas, but as something new, something different that she could build for herself. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch of the cabin, the desert air cool and still. The sun had just set, casting the sky in a soft shade of purple and orange, and the ranch stretched out before them, quiet and peaceful. Xavier turned to her, his expression serious yet soft. "Elena," he began, his voice low, "I've been thinking about something." She glanced over at him, surprised by the tone in his voice. "What's on your mind?" Xavier shifted slightly, his hand resting on the arm of his chair as he looked out at the land. "You've come a long way since we first met. I've seen you fight, I've seen you grow stronger, and I've seen you start to heal. But I think there's something we both need to think about, something that we haven't really addressed yet." Elena felt a twinge of unease in her chest. She knew where this was going. Xavier had been patient, kind, and respectful of her grief, but she also knew that he wasn't asking for something casual, something temporary. He had made it clear that he was here for the long haul. "What are you saying?" she asked softly. Xavier turned toward her then, his storm-gray eyes steady, his voice gentle. "I'm not asking you to let go of Thomas. I'm not asking you to forget him. But I need you to understand something. I'm here for you. For us. And I want more than just this partnership, Elena. I want to build something real with you. I want to be with you, not just as a man helping you run a ranch, but as someone who cares about you, who loves you." Elena felt a flutter in her chest. She had been bracing for this moment, yet the words still caught her off guard. Love. She hadn't thought about it in months, not in the way Xavier was speaking of it. The idea of opening her heart to someone again, after everything she'd been through, seemed almost impossible. But there it was, the possibility, right in front of her. I don't know what to say," Elena whispered, her hands resting in her lap, nervously picking at the fabric of her skirt. "I never thought I'd feel this way again. I've been so afraid of letting go of the past, of betraying everything I had with Thomas." Xavier reached out then, his hand gently brushing hers, his touch warm and steady. "You don't have to choose between the past and the future. You can have both. Your love for Thomas doesn't disappear just because you find room for someone else in your heart. I'm not asking you to replace him. I'm asking you to let me in, to let us build something together. If you'll have me." The sincerity in his voice, the calm, unwavering certainty, took Elena by surprise. She had expected him to push her, to rush her, but instead, he was offering her space. Time. No pressure. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared of what it means to love again, to let someone else in. It feels like I'm dishonoring Thomas's memory, like I'm forgetting him." Xavier gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're not forgetting him. You're honoring him by living, by carrying his memory with you and continuing to build the life he dreamed of. I want to be a part of that, Elena, not as a replacement for him, but as someone who wants to share this life with you." Elena sat there for a moment, the silence between them stretching, filled with the weight of her thoughts. And in that moment, she realized something that had been quietly growing within her for weeks. She had been afraid of moving forward, of letting go of the past, but the truth was, she wasn't losing anything. She was building, she was healing. She looked up at Xavier, meeting his gaze. "I don't know what this looks like. I don't know how to let go of my grief and still honor Thomas. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try with you." Xavier's eyes softened, a slow smile spreading across his face. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "That's all I need, Elena, just your willingness. We'll take it one day at a time. We'll build it together." Quote. And in that moment, Elena realized that the future wasn't as terrifying as she had once thought. There was still grief, still love for Thomas, but there was also something new, something that could bloom if she allowed it. And Xavier was there, steady and patient, offering her the space to grow. The rest of the evening passed quietly, the two of them sitting together as the stars began to appear, the land around them still and peaceful. And as Elena leaned her head against Xavier's shoulder, a sense of peace settled over her, as if she had finally found the balance she had been searching for. The ranch was thriving again, and so was she. As the days passed, the work continued, and so did their partnership. With every mended fence, with every repair made, Elena and Xavier built more than just a ranch. They built a life that honored the past but looked toward the future, where love, not grief, would guide them. Elena knew there would still be hard days. There would always be moments when the grief for Thomas would rise up again, unexpected and sharp. But with Xavier by her side, she knew she wasn't facing those moments alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. They had built something strong, something that would last. And together, they would face whatever came next,